He doesn't protect you. I would.
From what?
Yourself. You're weak, Viserys.
Hey, welcome back to ScreenCrush. I'm Rhaenyra. Daemon Targaryen is not a good person. He's a murderer and a war criminal. He made his brother's life a living hell. He seduced his niece. He planned to usurp the throne from his wife. He's a bad father, and he did a bunch of other despicable atrocities. But Daemon was also right about so many things. Everything that happened in House of the Dragon was predicted by Daemon in the first episode of the show.
And that council of leeches knows it. They all prey on you for their own ends.
He saw the conflict to come, and he had the plan to stop the war from the start. Viserys was a weak king, and he's responsible for the Targaryen civil war that would be the downfall of the dynasty. And thus far, Rhaenyra seems to be following in her father's footsteps. If only Viserys and Rhaenyra had listened to Daemon, this war wouldn't just be over, it would never have even started. And we're going to prove to you why his arc in Season 2 was not a total waste of time, and the entire season was actually way deeper than you think. And those visions that Daemon saw are far more important than just reminding us about Game of Thrones Season 8. Those visions and so many other things will prove why Daemon was right.
We need a place to gather here at Harrenhal. We cut off the west, surround King's Landing with the dragons, and we could have every greenhead mounted on spikes before the f***ing moon turns.
Alright, we have so much to cover in this video, but first we need to explain Daemon's motivations, because sometimes it seems that even Daemon doesn't know exactly what he wants. He sees himself as the unsung hero, the only one who has the will to protect the Targaryen dynasty, just like Aegon the Conqueror. But in reality, Daemon is an attention-craving wannabe king who needs to fill the empty void in his life with a purpose. His birthright was stolen from him, and this war is his way to recapture that lost glory. But under all of his ambition and unrestrained bloodthirst, Daemon truly wants to protect his family and the legacy of the Targaryens. However, the endless mistakes that Viserys and Rhaenyra made put the House of the Dragon on an inevitable path of war and self-destruction.
The only thing that could tear down the House of the Dragon was itself.
I am so excited to finally tell you guys about this. We took the Game of Thrones studio tour in Northern Ireland where they shot Game of Thrones. Guys, I am geeking out so much right now. Not only is this place filled with the original props, costumes, and production design from the original show, but this is the actual studio where they shot these scenes. I am standing on the actual stage where they declared Jon Snow King in the North. This is Cersei's actual map room. And yes, this is the actual throne room where Jon Snow killed Daenerys. We are here because we're part of a talk show called Throne Talk to celebrate Game of Thrones legends, and I'm here to compete against other YouTubers like Me, How to Beat, and the Film Theorists. It has been so much fun. And I just want to thank the sponsor who made this dream come true, Game of Thrones Legends. I have been hooked on this mobile game for about a month now. I played it all the way here. It's a match 3 game where you assemble your own house with characters from all eras of Game of Thrones. Right now, my favorite lineup has Queen Daenerys, Ghost, Crabfeeder, the Hound, and Tyrion, but there are dozens of champions to choose from. The point of the game is to assemble a new house to fight the Long Night and defeat the White Walkers, after you lose to them in the very first fight of the game. So this stream was so much fun, and I cannot wait for you guys to see it. I met other YouTubers, and we geeked out about Game of Thrones legends, and had a really fun time. We played the game, and the whole event was in the style of a pre-recorded late-night talk show. The stream is going to be on the Deerstalker Pictures YouTube channel on their YouTube Live section, and we have the exact date and time listed in our description. So to join in the fun, download Game of Thrones Legends by clicking the link in the description or scan our QR code to get 50 gold, 3,000 food, and a daily summon token to start your journey. Now, back to what I was saying. Without any sons, Viserys' only male heir was Daemon, but Viserys disinherited him and proclaimed Rhaenyra as his new heir. Viserys believed that his daughter would be a much better ruler than Daemon, and he even entrusted her with Aegon's dream.
That's the prophecy thing about ice zombies, right?
Yes, it is. Aegon foresaw the White Walkers. But this is where Viserys started failing and why Daemon predicted exactly what will unfold in the next 20 years in this scene.
He doesn't protect you. I would.
From what?
Yourself. You're weak, Viserys. And that council of leeches knows it. They all prey on you for their own ends.
The problem was that Viserys was a good man who desperately tried to preserve peace. His intentions were good, and for a while he wasn't a terrible ruler, but he was unable to act. He kept avoiding conflicts. This made him appear as a weak, indecisive king who couldn't enforce his authority. When Viserys chose Rhaenyra as his heir, he started a chain of events that culminated in a civil war.
Because Westeros is filled with a bunch of sexes.
Actually, no, there is merit to what Rhaenys says here.
Men would sooner put the realm to the torch than see a woman ascend the Iron Throne.
That is true to a point. Rhaenys was passed over because she was a woman. But here's the thing. Westeros isn't a democracy. The man with the most soldiers is king, but the man with dragons is the king of kings. So it doesn't matter if the other lords accept a woman on the throne. Whatever the king says goes, and the houses must obey.
Who gives a what some lord thinks? You are the dragon. Your word is truth and law.
Any house that doesn't accept Rhaenyra will have to face dragons. Any rebellion will end in fire, just as Aegon the Conqueror proved when he took over Westeros with his sister wives. So, when Viserys proclaimed Rhaenyra as the heir apparent, all the important lords and ladies bent their knees and swore oaths to her. But then Viserys splits the house and creates the conflict in this show.
Because Viserys made more babies?
Exactly. He immediately undermined Rhaenyra by marrying Alicent and producing multiple male heirs.
You couldn't keep it in your pants.
Come on, Charles.
He's right, Santiago. Your libido has endangered us all.
And in Westerosi society, men have a stronger claim to the throne. Just as Damon predicted, Otto put his claws into Viserys, making his own plans to grab power by sending Alicent to seduce him.
So I see Otto Hightower for what he is.
A second son who stands to inherit nothing he doesn't seize for himself.
And thus ensuring that House Hightower is united with the Targaryen dynasty. His descendants will be dragon riders, they will rule, and hold ultimate power in the Seven Kingdoms. And so it was inevitable that the Greens would undermine Rhaenyra and usurp the throne from her, one way or another.
And to secure her claim, she'll have to put your children to the sword.
You are the challenge! You are the challenge, Aegon! Simply by living and breathing!
Now, to be fair, Viserys never disinherits Rhaenyra. He always stood by her, even when everyone else undermined him and her. He never changed his mind about Rhaenyra being queen. However, for about 2 decades, there was this uncertainty of who will actually inherit the Iron Throne, and Viserys failed to assert his authority and Rhaenyra's claim. He needed to give her a prominent position of power to reaffirm her authority, like serving as hand to the king or master of something important.
Or a master of dragons. How come they don't have that?
I know, right? They totally should have had that.
Dragon Master. I alone control the dragons.
Here's the thing. After his wife's death, Viserys had limited options. He could simply not marry again, stand by Rhaenyra, and hope that Daemon doesn't start a civil war. Or simply marry them and then Daemon will become king.
Consort.
But Daemon was way too unpredictable, and there is logic in Viserys marrying again. The life expectancy of Targaryen women can become very short once they become pregnant because of all that incest. So Viserys could have married the 12-year-old Lyanna and declared their sons as his heirs. This would ensure a strong alliance between the 2 most powerful houses in the realm. Or he could do what he did, marry Alicent and declare Aegon as the heir. And to solve all of his problems by simply marrying Aegon to Rhaenyra.
Yeah, but he was a baby.
And he will grow. This would end any disputes of succession because his eldest child would be married to his eldest male heir.
Problem solved.
And if Rhaenyra was smart, she would have manipulated her brother. So while Aegon would sit on the throne, it would be Rhaenyra who was ruling the Seven Kingdoms. So basically, Margaery Tyrell and Tommen. Now this probably would have been the best path for everyone and would have prevented the war. But what did Viserys do instead? He proved that he's indecisive by creating a succession crisis that undermines Rhaenyra in every way. And what's worse, he armed all of his kids with weapons of mass destruction. And throughout all of the first season, it wasn't clear if Viserys actually wanted Rhaenyra to inherit him.
I saw it in a dream. A male babe, born to me, wearing the conqueror's crown.
A dream that he abandoned when he named Rhaenyra. He was responsible for his wife's death, and that guilt and regret ate at him, so he believed the only way to set things right was to make Rhaenyra his heir. The very idea of taking the inheritance away from her would be like killing his wife all over again. So Viserys let guilt guide him as opposed to doing what was best for everyone.
What if I was wrong?
He did nothing when Daemon and Corlys started a war in the Stepstones. He turns a blind eye to the truth about Rhaenyra's sons. When Alicent attacks Rhaenyra, his firstborn and heir, Viserys simply says,
We'll speak no more of it.
Criston Cole kills a guy at a wedding, and rather than being punished, he was promoted. And for years, Viserys failed to handle the rivalries and bitterness within his own family. Viserys allowed dissent to fester, sending a very clear message to the other lords and ladies of the great houses, that the king is too weak and they can ignore the oaths that they made to his daughter.
So why didn't he do anything about it? He had to know what was going on, right?
Well, because Viserys wanted desperately to maintain the peace. He inherited 50 years of peace from old Jaehaerys, who brought stability to the realm, and he needed to keep that stability because of the Song of Ice and Fire. Aegon foresaw the White Walkers attacking from beyond the wall, and Viserys believed that the houses had to be united for the Long Night. He was correct to fear war, because in the era of dragons, war meant fire and devastation.
The idea that we control the dragons is an illusion.
However, Viserys hid behind Aegon's dream. All of his actions were actually counterintuitive to the prophecy.
My brother was a slave to his omens and portents. Anything to make his feckless reign appear to have purpose.
The simple truth is that Viserys actually needed Daemon by his side, not as the hand or the heir, but as someone to protect him from himself. And maybe together the brothers Targaryen could have made far better decisions that kept Westeros strong. But Viserys feared Daemon because, like Otto, he saw him as a second Maegor.
Daemon would be a second Maegor, or worse.
Oh yeah, he's a Maegor. I know who he is, but explain who is Maegor.
Well, Maegor is in some ways a lot like Daemon. He was the second son of Aegon the Conqueror. His older brother, the king, was also weak and soft, and his actions triggered a revolt that almost destroyed the dynasty. Sound familiar? It was Maegor who put down the rebels. He burned everyone who stood in his way. Maegor then usurped the throne and became a cruel tyrant, and this is why they called him Maegor the Cruel. Maegor's cruelty led to the first Targaryen civil war, and the first time dragons killed each other in Westeros. And this reflects the War of Succession in House of the Dragon. Eventually, Maegor's reign of terror was extinguished when Jaehaerys united the houses against him and created a long period of peace. Ironically, while everybody feared that Daemon would become a second Maegor, it's Aemond who usurps the throne from his weaker brother. He's the one who uses his dragon like a giant napalm bomb and burns down cities. And Aemond is the product of the Greens. The same people who said that Daemon would be just like Maegor ended up being the very people who created the second Maegor.
Ironic.
So this is yet another failure of Viserys, because on top of everything, he failed as a father. He is the reason why Aemond rose to power. Not to mention his eldest son is an incompetent idiot who needs Google Translate to talk to a dragon.
Nuke Goston Bivilus Segiton Bilivazni.
And in fact, a lot of what Viserys did wrong in Season 1 also applies to Rhaenyra. So this brings us to why Damon was right about Rhaenyra. The Greens usurped power right under Viserys while he was too weak and sick to rule, just like Damon predicted. And Rhaenyra brought it on herself.
Wait, person, you're saying Rhaenyra is weak like her dad?
No, she isn't weak, but she's righteous and has many good intentions. Just like Viserys, her moral compass is both her best trait and also her biggest flaw. Ever since the Green Wedding, Alicent made it vividly clear that she and Rhaenyra are enemies. Otto undermined her from the start, and her brothers made the line of succession uncertain. The Greens had been making alliances with the strong houses. Most members of the small council were loyal to the Greens, and the end result was obvious. They were going to usurp the throne.
Am I to understand that members of the small council have been planning secretly to install my son without me?
And this was obvious to everyone, especially Rhaenyra. But for years, she sort of refused to play the Game of Thrones.
When you play the Game of Thrones, you win or you die.
But she needed to be better at this, not only because she was the heir, but also because she attended small council meetings. She was part of the political system from a young age. But for almost 2 decades, Rhaenyra did very little to ensure that she would indeed ascend to the throne. She didn't secure political capital, she didn't make any significant alliances, she didn't put plans in place in case the Greens tried to usurp her.
You plan to kill them?
It is unsavory, yes. But a sacrifice we must make to secure Aegon's succession, and then there is Daemon to consider.
And Rhaenyra's affair with Harwin Strong only made things worse for her. She put her inheritance at risk by giving birth to not only 1, but 3 sons who looked nothing like her husband. Everyone knew that they were bastards, so this jeopardized Rhaenyra as well as Jace and his brothers.
Did you think I would have dark hair when you took Harwin Strong into your bed? Did you think I might favor him, or did it not cross your mind?
And this only painted Viserys as an even weaker ruler, because for years he allowed Daemon to get away with serious crimes, even the murder of his first wife. And now Viserys is letting his daughter get away with affairs and bastards.
To have 1 child like that is a mistake. To have 3 is an insult.
And when she understands the mess that she's in, Rhaenyra fled King's Landing, removing herself from any influence or power. She was isolated on Dragonstone for 6 years, even allowing the Greens to rule while her father was too sick. And all of that despite her knowing the threat that the Greens posed to her claim to the throne.
Keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer.
She only came back when Luke's inheritance was threatened, and it happens only because Rhaenyra lost her political capital. Which is kind of selfish, because for 6 years, her father was dying and getting drugged by the Greens, and she didn't really do anything about it. And it seems like Rhaenyra's decisions are kind of short-sighted.
You take that back.
Well, she makes huge mistakes, but she doesn't appear to have any real long-term plans to protect herself or her sons. Instead, she kept relying on her dad to defend her, and he did, but she never really took a real initiative to make her own moves other than marrying Damon and forming a last-minute alliance with Rhaenys. It's like Rhaenyra was naive and just figured her inheritance was a done deal, and everybody would support her because, well, they made a promise.
Always keep your promises if you want to keep your friends.
Rhaenyra's short-term planning only becomes an even bigger issue once she becomes queen. Now, after the Greens crown Aegon, Daemon wants to use their superior numbers of dragons to destroy their enemies.
We have Syrax, Caraxes, and Meleys. Your sons have Virmax, Arax, and Tyraxes. Baela has Moondancer. Dragonstone has 13 to their 4.
But Rhaenyra immediately shuts him down. She knows that dragons are basically nuclear bombs. But the moment Aemon killed Luke, there was no stopping the war, and the dragons became part of it.
I want Aemon Targaryen.
And then Daemon sent blood and cheese to kill little Jaehaerys.
This is war! I declare war!
But dragons are a nuclear deterrent, even if they don't burn down armies and castles. The fact that Rhaenyra has so many dragons means that she can attack the Greens on multiple fronts. Have a few dragons fly over a few towns and armies, and the allies of the Greens might start rethinking their allegiances. The threat of dragons could halt enemies, which is exactly why the Lannisters refused to march without air support. And there was a chance to avoid too much collateral if Rhaenyra would have acted sooner. But she hesitated, and there's no way to avoid major casualties. Rhaenyra repeats the same mistakes, just like her father. She's righteous and wants to maintain the moral high ground. She understands that she must fight this war to defeat the Greens and kill soldiers, but she also wants to achieve peace and avoid battle.
I inherited 80 years of peace from my father. Before I was to end it, I needed to know that there was no other path.
But Rhaenyra never tries to negotiate with Aegon or the Green Council. She doesn't offer any terms, she just meets with Alicent in secret while putting herself at grave risk. So the perception around Rhaenyra is that she is a soft-hearted and indecisive queen with no real battle strategy.
Is that you're so hell-bent on doing the right thing that you sometimes don't do the smart thing.
But Daemon laid out the plan to win the war all the way back in the first Black Council meeting.
We need a place to gather. Here at Harrenhal, we cut off the west, surround King's Landing with the dragons, and we could have every greenhead mounted on spikes before the fucking moon turns.
Use their superior number of dragons, unite the Riverlands, take Harrenhal, and use it as a stronghold for a large army. Harrenhal is important because it is the biggest castle in Westeros, but it's also strategically important to winning the war. Controlling Harrenhal cuts off the Green Army from marching north of the Riverlands, and the Blacks now have a direct route to march on King's Landing, with the Valyrian fleet attacking from the sea and dragons from the air. And while Daemon committed a few war crimes, he saw some creepy visions and he got schooled by a child, eventually he created a strong alliance and a huge army. So Daemon basically put all the pieces together for Rhaenyra to win the war.
Well, not against Maegor. He can't beat Sky Godzilla.
Well, actually, he had a plan for that also. Daemon wanted to team up with Rhaenys and kill Aemond and Vhagar.
We're going to King's Landing.
To what end?
Killing Vhagar. I cannot face that hoary old bitch alone. With my dragon and yours together, we can kill Vhagar and her rider.
In this scene, Daemon undermines Rhaenyra by taking action while she's away, something he does a lot, which creates a rift between them. Now, this war is finally his chance to prove himself. It is a conflict he has been preparing for his entire life. And he keeps acting like he's in charge because he doesn't respect Rhaenyra as queen.
You should address me as my king.
But you're the prince.
What would you call the husband of the queen?
Well, the king.
There it is then.
Consort.
That last bit seems unnecessary, don't you think?
But this is a good plan. Vhagar is huge, but Caraxes is pretty big and experienced in battle. And Meleys is fast and formidable. She put up a serious fight against Vhagar, well, at least until the mountain-sized dragon did its signature sneak attack out of nowhere. Granted, attacking King's Landing was risky with all of their defenses, but Ulf went on a joyride in the middle of the city with no resistance whatsoever. Keep in mind that before the Battle of Rook's Rest, Daemon was the only one of the dragon riders with real combat experience, the other being Laenor. Everybody else has always used their dragons like private jets.
Even Rhaenys?
Yes, Rook's Rest was her first real battle, so Aemon didn't have any battle experience either. Bullying Luke and Arax does not count. The combined firepower of Caraxes and Meleys might have put an end to the mighty Vhagar. Or, at the very least, they could have killed or severely injured Aemond. And taking out Aemond is almost the same as removing Vhagar from the war.
Why is that?
Well, dragons are intelligent, but their moods are primarily influenced by their riders. Vhagar only fights in this war because of Aemond. Back when Laena was her rider, Vhagar and Caraxes were friendly to each other. And before that, Vhagar's rider was Balon, Daemon's father, and Meleys was ridden by his mother. So without Aemond, Vhagar would just get a long nap. And with no other green riders, they will have no real defense against dragons. So the Blacks would win easily. But neither Rhaenys nor Rhaenyra listen to Daemon because all they see is a bloodthirsty man who undermines them both. And look, they're justified in their treatment of Daemon. He deserved their anger, but they don't want to even find some middle ground with their strategies, and instead, it's more important for both of them to put him in his place.
It is a command.
Would that you were the king.
Rhaenys preaches against using the dragons in battle, but I guess she kind of forgot about that time she killed hundreds of innocent people in King's Landing when she made her dramatic entrance in the dragon pit. But her morals stopped her from blasting all the Greens right there and then, end the war before it even started, and saving countless lives in the future.
If you'd have acted when you had the chance, Aegon's line would be extinguished, and Luke would be alive.
Rhaenyra eventually sends Rhaenys into battle, but it's too late, and it's a very short-sighted plan.
Person, you're being a hater right now. Rhaenys is so cool, and she and her dragons are the best.
Oh, she's the queen that should have been, no doubt about that. But Rhaenyra sent one dragon to fight, knowing very well that the Greens had 4, and one of them was twice Meleys's size. She walked right into Aemond's trap, not once considering that, it might be a trap.
It's a trap! Oh, wait, never mind. It's too late.
After the death of Rhaenys, Rhaenyra lost one of her most important war assets, leaving her with very limited options. But Rhaenyra let her marital spat with Daemon leave herself and her entire alliance without their top general and one of their biggest dragons.
We need Damon and his dragon.
May I be free for even 1 hour of the constant refrain of Daemon, Daemon, Daemon.
It was only thanks to plot armor that Aemon didn't attack Dragonstone after Rhaenys fell. Rhaenyra refused to work with Daemon because she was justifiably angry with him, but it was also out of arrogance and ego because she wanted to prove that she doesn't need him to win the war.
I will go.
If you die, all is lost.
Then I myself must do it. It is I who must fight.
That she is the queen and she can do it herself despite what she says here.
Taught the name of every lord and castle between Storm's End and the Twins, but not the difference between hilt and foible.
But she also knew that Daemon is hot-headed and she could not trust him. Yet, she let him make plans in the Riverlands, knowing very well that this war could easily become 3-sided. Now don't get me wrong, what Daemon did was pure evil, and there is no way to justify his horrific actions. But...
Person, don't say what I think you're gonna say.
What am I saying?
You're gonna play devil's advocate, aren't you?
No, but think about it. When Daemon sent Blood and Cheese to kill little Jaehaerys, he actually created a chain reaction that led to the Greens falling apart. Well, at least in Season 2. From what we know about the show, Aegon and Helaena have only 2 children. After Jaehaerys is murdered, Aemond is next in line. Aegon goes ballistic and fires Otto, who's ironically the voice of reason among the Greens. And then they just start losing it. Aegon drunk rides into battle, and then Aemond tries to kill him. So Aemond usurps the throne from his brother. But Aemond is such a tyrant that everybody either fears him or betrays him, like Larys Strong. Alicent realizes that the war she started is fully out of control, and her failure as a mother created a monster. So she ends up betraying her entire family and willingly surrendering to Rhaenyra and sacrificing Aegon to achieve peace.
Don't give me that look. I happen to be a more caring mother than most.
But that's not all. When Vhagar burned Sunfire, the Greens lost one of their only 4 dragons. Now, it's still unclear if Sunfire is dead.
My dragon is dead.
But even if he's alive, his fighting days are going to be way behind him. So that means that other than Vhagar, the Greens don't have real firepower in the sky.
They have 2 more dragons, though.
Well, Dreamfire is pretty big, but she's been locked up under the Dragon Pit for decades, and Helaena refuses to ride her into battle. Viserion might be blue and awesome looking, but also very young and very small, while the Blacks have 8 dragons, 9 if Rhaena claims Sheepstealer. Aemond is too reactionary, and every time he feels undermined, he loses control. So he won't hunker down. He will try to prove himself in battle, but even Vhagar can't be everywhere at once. The Green Army and the fleet will be defenseless against dragon attacks, and sooner or later, the Blacks will catch Aemond and his dragon on the battlefield. And then, all they need is the combined forces of Caraxes, Vermithor, and Seasmoke, and Vhagar will fall.
Bam! Bitch went down.
So when Damon killed Jaehaerys, he triggered a chain of events that effectively doomed the Greens and won Rhaenyra the war. But she didn't capitalize on it in time. So even after she becomes queen, Rhaenyra doesn't have that many good long-term plans, and she still somehow doesn't understand how to play the Game of Thrones.
What would you have me do?
Rhaenyra forms an alliance with the Starks and House Aaron early on, and she relies on the houses that stayed loyal to her. But that's it. She doesn't form any other alliances after the war starts. Daemon united the Riverlords. It was Jace who made the alliance with the Freys and the twins. It was Jace who had the idea to find new dragon riders. And while Rhaenyra's alliance with Mysaria bore many fruits, all of those plans were hidden from her council. Instead, she keeps dismissing her council members and gets angry when they expect her to take action.
It is my fault, I think, that you have forgotten to fear me.
But for a while, Rhaenyra didn't really have an actual strategy to win this war. Sure, many of these people are sexist and have backward views on women, but these are men who stood by her from the start. Allies who honored their oaths, and she takes them for granted. She even freezes them all out of her secret plans with Mysaria. Rhaenyra goes on a secret stealth mission to meet Alicent in King's Landing, not only putting herself in serious danger, but also telling no one but Mysaria. This is the second time Rhaenyra disappears, leaving no one in charge of her council or the war effort. If the queen is captured, then who do the Blacks fight for? Jace? Daemon? So, as harsh as it is, Damon was right when he says,
"The mother grieves as the queen shirks her duties."
Sure, she's the queen and she doesn't need their permission. But at this point in the war, Rhaenyra simply does not have the luxury of expecting the lords of Westeros to stay loyal to her. This is Westeros. Houses change allegiances on a dime. She should have realized this when Boros Baratheon betrayed her, which led to her son's death. Robb Stark pretty much lost the war after Roose Bolton betrayed him in the Red Wedding. In war, everyone is self-serving. Well, except the Starks. How does Rhaenyra expect to unite the houses against the White Walkers if for 20 plus years she refused to create any tangible alliances? Now, to be fair, Rhaenyra does start turning things around once she actually starts playing the game with help from Mysaria. But the reason why Rhaenyra trusts her so quickly is because Mysaria believes in her as a queen. She doesn't undermine her like her council.
Oh, they would make me queen, but they wish to keep me here, confined.
They betray their own smallness.
She doesn't make her feel weak or useless like Daemon or Jace. But there's danger there. First of all, a ruler who surrounds themselves with people who only agree with them and don't challenge them is risky. But secondly, Rhaenyra barely knows Mysaria, and she's the only person that Rhaenyra seems to be trusting completely. And this could really backfire on her. During the Red Sowing, Rhaenyra sacrificing all those small folk. These people trusted Mysaria, and Rhaenyra used that trust and got most of them killed.
Some of you may die, but it's a sacrifice I am willing to make.
So with the access and trust Rhaenyra gave Mysaria, she could destroy her if she ever betrays her.
Do not underestimate your subjects. They are 1,000 living in the shadow of the Red Keep and forgotten for too long.
Now, speaking of the Red Sowing, this brings us to Rhaenyra's best move. She got 3 new dragons. Rhaenyra finally understands that Daemon was right. She cannot win this war without dragons, and she must use them to fight. And just like Daemon had planned, she finds new riders for the unclaimed dragons.
There are also unclaimed dragons. Seasmoke still resides on Driftmark. Vermithor and Silverwing dwell on the Dragon Mound. Then there are the 3 wild dragons, all of whom nest here.
But those dragons might end up being her biggest downfall.
Wait, what? How's that a bad thing? The Blacks have so many dragons now. They don't need anything else to win.
Well, that is true unless these new dragon riders turn on her.
Explain yourself, person.
Well, Rhaenyra obviously had no choice but to find riders for Vermithor and Silverwing. They're her best weapons against Vhagar. They're also the answer to Daemon in case he ever betrays her. But by making new allies with the dragon riders, Rhaenyra might have created the enemies that would bring her down. Now, Adam seems like a pretty good guy who will be loyal to his queen. But what about the other two? Ulf already let his elevated position go to his head. He openly undermines Luke, and based on that dinner scene, he's not the most trustworthy guy.
A knight will comport himself with grace at the queen's table.
Best make me a knight then.
But Hugh might be a bigger threat.
But why? He's like Targaryen Thor.
Well, Hugh is one of the many small folk in King's Landing, desperately starving under the blockade. A blockade that killed his daughter. It was easy to blame the Greens while he was one of the people in the city. But now, Hugh is among the Blacks, and his new position gives him a new perspective on the war. The Greens failed the small folk, but it was Rhaenyra who was responsible for that blockade. Like most of the people of King's Landing, Hugh and his family were casualties of war, pawns for both sides, not people, but pieces on a board. And that means that at some point, Hugh might blame Rhaenyra for his daughter's death. What might throw him over the edge is Rhaenyra sending her riders to attack cities. She finally decides to use her dragons and strike to end the war.
The strongholds of the usurper, Old Town and Lannisport and their armies, all must be subdued.
You wish for us to kill innocents?
And so many.
These attacks will result in many innocent people's deaths, casualties of war, just like Hugh's daughter. Small folk who were callously caught in the fire while their leaders wage wars at the expense of their lives. And keep in mind that Hugh is the grandson of old King Jaehaerys, which kind of means that he has a legitimate claim to the throne. Same as Ulf, by the way. He claims to be the half-brother of Viserys and Daemon.
Uncle to the one true queen, Rhaenyra Targaryen.
So, what happens when Hugh and Ulf decide that they want to be kings and betray Rhaenyra? Other than Vhagar, Vermithor and Silverwing are the biggest living dragons, and it will be impossible for Rhaenyra's dragons to fight them while also facing Vhagar. Daemon and Caraxes are the only ones who could stand a chance in such a battle. But Rhaenyra wouldn't even need this desperate plan of finding bastards to ride dragons if only she listened to Daemon from the start. This war would have been over by now. However, there is a bigger threat for everyone, the White Walkers. And this brings us to Daemon's vision.
It's all a story, and you're but one part in it. You know your part.
Daemon spends most of the season tripping his marbles, seeing dead people, and having strange talks with Alice Rivers. She shows him a vision of the future, and Daemon sees Aegon's dream. He witnesses the White Walkers and Rhaenyra on the Iron Throne, and this is why he stops his planned coup and fully supports Rhaenyra, because he now fully believes in Aegon's dream.
You can see. The visions are clear now. I see possible futures.
Okay, so how is Daemon right about the vision then?
Well, here's the thing. Rhaenyra says she wants to be queen because of the Song of Ice and Fire, but she doesn't even know if it's real or if it's just some overglorified story that her father latched onto. Rhaenyra made it clear that she in fact has ambitions to become queen.
I am the crown, but do you think I would choose infamy in exchange for a bushel of oranges or a ship to a shy?
Her father, the king, named her his one and only heir. It was the first time he considered her as worthy of his attention and love, that she was just as important as a male heir. And Rhaenyra really wants to ascend the Iron Throne, to prove a point, that the realm rejected Rhaenys as queen. But here's Rhaenyra, the real queen of the Seven Kingdoms. Not a queen through marriage, but one who sits on the Iron Throne. And now, all of those who doubted her will have to bend the knee and accept her as their rightful ruler. But the prophecy is real. The long night might have ended up being a very short night.
Yeah, that was a disappointment.
But in the vision, Daemon sees the White Walkers and Daenerys, and he sees what looks like a field of dead dragons. Now, this isn't a spoiler because there is a reason why in Game of Thrones all the dragons are gone before season 1. They all died, and the House of the Dragon is the story that will show how that happened. So it is possible that Rhaenyra's actions are in some way responsible for this, because in Daemon's vision, she's the one who sits on the throne. And now that Daemon is a true believer in the prophecy, he will do anything to stop the White Walkers. The visions he saw helped him overcome his obsession with his stolen birthright.
All that pain it caused, it crushes whoever wears it.
He wants to stop the White Walkers, and the only way to do that is to win this war so that Westeros can be united when the long night is finally upon them. But just like Rhaenyra was hesitant about the war and using the dragons, she might refuse to make the hard decisions that will stop this dream from coming true. Then Daemon will have to take action against her, because maybe that's the only way to ensure that the dragons don't die, and the Westeros will have the weapons to defeat the White Walkers in the future. And based on what happens in Game of Thrones, it seems like that is exactly what happened. So I guess time will tell who is actually right about those visions. But when it comes to everything else, Daemon was right, and if only Viserys and Rhaenyra listened to him, this war would never happen, and Targaryens would still have their dragons to fight the White Walkers. So, what do you guys think about all this? Was Daemon right all along? What could Viserys and Rhaenyra have done to stop this war? Big shout out to the writer and editor of this video, Pavel T. You can find his social links below, and you can let me know what you think down in the comments or at me on X Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe and smash that bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.